My name is Michael Sládek. I'm a filmmaker based in Brooklyn and the New York consultant for SAGindie, which is an organization that helps bridge the gap between independent filmmakers and union actors. I want to welcome everybody to our second SAGindie panel discussion titled Working Through Indie Filmmaking in the Age of COVID-19. Before we get started on diving into that fun subject, I feel like we should acknowledge, or I should acknowledge, and express our support for those doing all they can to not only proclaim that Black Lives Matter, but to pursue real change in all levels of society, especially when it comes to the rights of people of color and to dismantling white supremacy in all its forms. The issue is close to our hearts at SAGindie. We've made it a point for many years to proactively engage in the process of inclusion at all levels of our industry and in society, and we're going to continue doing that going forward. So with that said, let's get to the other fun subject, only slightly more cheery, I guess, of how to get back into production in indie films, considering this period of pandemic and economic, shall we say, collapse or issue, I don't know. So we're going to discuss kind of strategies, pitfalls, concerns, ideas, opportunities, any silver linings that we might want to consider going forward. I'm joined today by a great group of very experienced professionals, all of whom perform different tasks in the film industry. So we'll start with some introductions. I promise this won't all be just me talking through this whole thing, but I'm going to read some bios so those who are watching, who are tuning in, know who you are. So the woman I consider the hardest woman working in showbiz today is, of course, Katherine Curtin. Her numerous TV credits include Stranger Things, Homeland, Blacklist, Insecure, Orange is the New Black, Mindhunter, and Bull. Her numerous film credits include Bad Education, Blush, The Artist's Wife, Beauty, Mark Goldstar, The Light of the Moon, Crazy Famous, and Breaking Brooklyn. Before the Great Pause, she shot leads in the indie features Werewolves Within, 18½, Red Pill, Kendra and Beth, and First One In. She's a SAG Award winner for Best Ensemble 2015 and 2016 from Orange is the New Black. Next up, we have writer, director, playwright Dewey Jarrod, who's best known for Brooklyn Blue Sky, which is the first acquired web series for BET Networks after winning the Xfinity Best Web Series Award at the American Black Film Festival. Issa Rae's Color Creative has acquired his new series King Esther with its first season out now. King Esther has garnered Dewey Outstanding Director and Outstanding Writer Daytime Emmy nominations. Next up, a career assistant director with over 80 narrative, commercial, and short film credits. Isabella Olaguera's films include the Oscar-nominated short film My Nephew Emmett, as well as features All These Small Moments, The Perfect Murder, and A Very Nutty Christmas. When COVID-19 hit, she created the Feed the Freelancers to help her freelance film family stay healthy. Isabella is also a proud member of New York Women in Film and Television. Michael Prall is a creative producer based in Brooklyn. Most recently, he produced the feature Sound of Silence, was co-producer on Halston, both of which premiered at Sundance 2019. He also produced Love After Love, which received the Best Cinematography Award at Tribeca 2017, as well as The Strange Ones, which received a Special Jury Award for Breakthrough Actor at South by Southwest 2017, and The Mend, which received nominations for both the Gotham Awards and Independent Spirit Awards of 2018. Next up, founding partner Barton Schnee Casting. Paul Schnee is a top casting director and producer who has won and been nominated for multiple RTOS Awards and Independent Spirit Awards. His casting credits include Oscar winners Spotlight, Dallas Buyers Club, and The Help, Oscar nominees Winter's Bone and August Osage County, as well as Clemency, The Girl on the Train, Leave No Trace, Ma, The Mend, Love and Mercy, Still Alice, as well as TV's Jessica Jones and The Last OG. And then last but not least is partner at Granderson DesRochers with offices in LA and New York. Anita Surendran is an entertainment lawyer whose practice is primarily focused on individual and corporate clients in the film, TV, and digital media industries. She served as production counsel on over 100 indie film productions and as outside counsel for various studios and networks, including A24, Netflix, and Amazon. Anita continues to expand her practice with a focus on established and emerging talent. Some of the clients that she works with include Mary J. Blige, Jesse Williams, Taylor Page, Kofi Siriboe, Lars Knudsen, and Mass Appeal. And something I did not know about Anita is that she used to be a professional dancer on videos and NBA games and at award shows. And if anybody finds any video for that, they get extra points, all right? So forward that. So as we get started, I want to encourage all of you, I know you all do different jobs in the industry, but I want to encourage all of you to feel free to express any of your opinions about your positions, about other people's positions, about whatever. This is a discussion. It's not pinpointed that you have to talk about only about what you work with, especially since they're, you know, I'm sure everybody has done a few things over the years. So let's start off with just a quick update of where everybody's at in terms of projects, in terms of careers, how have things been affected by the shutdown in particular. For lack of a better process, I'll just start up in the upper left corner, at least from my screen's point of view, with Mike. Do you want to tell us what you've been working on and where things are at this point?
Yeah, I have actually been working with a company called Public Record. Recently focused much more on, or personally focused much more on documentary work with Public Record. So that's been sort of the most recent thing that I've been doing since the shutdowns. We're lucky. We're actually still sort of mid production on a documentary series for a new network called Quibi, and sort of watching the news very closely, figuring out when production can start in various ways. Our series happens to have an archival footage component, and so we've been able to still do that despite the shutdowns. Everyone working remotely, researching and editing. So that's been nice. And then within the company, at a time like this, and what a lot of people are saying is let's work on development, and so that's sort of what's been been the focus the last couple months. So that's been that since the last narrative films that I've done were a year ago or so before I started with Public Record, and but still involved in a few in various ways, and we can talk about, I can sort of reference those more as we get more into this conversation, I think.
Okay. Isabella, you want to go next?
Sure. So like most people, I think, all of my prospective jobs for the season were postponed indefinitely or canceled altogether in early March. So by late March, I retooled my industry experience and started up Feed the Freelancers, which is a charity initiative that delivers free groceries to non-union freelancers who are unemployed due to COVID-19. In the 9 weeks since we've started, we've raised about $28,000 on our GoFundMe. We fed over it's over 1,900 in New York City alone, freelancers and their families, half of those being non-union film and entertainment folks. And we have alliances with New York Production Alliance, Film Biz Recycling, Freelancers Union, rental houses like Lightbulb Grip and Electric, and Resolution Rentals in Philadelphia, and of course Edge Auto Rentals too. Basically, I went from being a first AD whose biggest problems were, are we gonna have to have second meal today? Or is this company move gonna be messed up by a marathon, to how are we going to feed our non-union film folks and any kind of freelance folks in a time where, we're considered, I think it's a phase 4 back in production, I think, and we're not at phase 1 yet. So just trying to keep everybody afloat and alive has been, our priorities recently.
All right, great. Kathy, you want to tell us what you've been up to?
I unmuted because I'm technically a genius. It's funny because I was supposed to be shooting one of the leads in an indie feature right now because that's my jam. Indie is my jam, and obviously that's not happening. And on March 15th, when the Great Pause happened, I was shooting a lead in another feature out on Long Island, and they had 4 days left to shoot. And they had to stop production with 4 days left to shoot. And I think that's really painful for an indie budget, because they had people that they had flown in from LA. They had put everybody up, you know, and they had built everything. So that was really hard. But they just called me. It's called 18 and a half, and it's on the 18 and a half minutes in the Nixon Watergate tapes that are missing, right? So it's really interesting, and it's kind of like a thriller, but it's really fun romantic thriller. I'm not the romance. Anyway, so they just called me and they said they want to go back. You know, they've got 4 days, and I think they're going to try to go back in August. And they're a small film, so that means I think that the actors are the only ones that really need to be near each other. There are 4 of us. I think camera can definitely social distance, right? They can definitely be 6 feet. And I think everybody else can be 6 feet. So I don't think the issue, you know, they'll have, I guess they're not going to have one makeup person per actor, because that was one of the recommendations. But this is an indie, and it's not a huge budget. So one makeup artist will be doing probably 4 actors. But I think that these are really smart people, and everybody will wear masks, and maybe do a lot of your own hair and makeup, do a lot of your own touch-ups. And not worry about that end of it too much. You know, I'm willing, and all 4 of the other actors are willing. And these are 4 actors that Vondi Curtis Hall, and 2 young actors who are just wonderful. And so I feel like people want to get back to work. And the good thing about actors, and maybe this isn't really the truth or not, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but we take really good care of ourselves. You know, like I have SAG insurance, but I think the only time I ever use it is to go to that annual physical so that I can get insurance on some job that's going to pay for me to do indie films. And so I feel like I feel comfortable around actors working, you know, maybe not a kissing scene or whatever. I don't get asked to do that many of those. But I feel like actors are generally, they you know, tend to be, and obviously I'm not a doctor and I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't have a problem working with 4 or 5 actors or 2 or 3 actors on a scene. And I think if you can just get everybody there, the director's going to come in 2 weeks early. He's going to quarantine coming in from LA. People are going to be really smart. Everybody is being put up in separate cabins. The cabins are all far apart from each other. I feel like we need to work, and I feel like people need our work, right? I have a 19-year-old niece who said she's watched everything there is. And that's probably true of 19-year-olds, right? So I feel like whatever, if there was any doubt that art provides a service, now is the time that we understand that art provides a service. And COVID and the abyss, the economic tragedy, the medical tragedy, the death, people need to turn on the movie. People need to turn on their TV. We are it for a lot of people right now. And so I feel like it is incumbent upon us to get back to work if we can. That's just my stupid sense, you know. That's my 2 cents.
You're here. And if anybody can plow forward, it's Dan Mervish. He'll probably end up doing your makeup himself.
I know he will. I know he will. I know he will. He will. I happen to have a wig in my trunk, and I got to set, and I'm like, Dan, I have a wig in my trunk. Do you want to see the wig? I mean, I don't know. Nobody was talking about a wig. He's like, yeah, let's see the wig. I'm wearing the wig throughout the movie. You know, like it's. Don't
need anybody. There's one person now.
Yeah, but that's what's so great about indie film is that it's incredibly collaborative, and it's spontaneous and creative and inspiring. And I think small sets are the bomb. And I love to work with people that closely. And so I think indie films, even though the budgets are lower, I think we can be some of the first to get back to work.
All right, cool. Let's move forward. Anita?
Yeah, so we, sort of our practice ranges from production council work at very small budgets through, $25, $30 million budgets, also serving as outside counsel for a lot of the networks and studios. Right before COVID, I probably had 4 films in production, but none of them were true indies. So we were subject to whatever that studio's policy was, or, most of them went on hiatus for 2 weeks at a time until we realized this was a bigger issue and we needed to reschedule actors, and people were flying in from London and things like that. So one of them will be pushed till later this year, hopefully. 2 have already pushed to next year at the same time. On the other side of things, we do a lot of development work as it is. That's really ramped up, as Michael was saying as well. A couple of my clients are directing an animation film, so that's been moving forward because they can work remotely, and as with documentaries, they can continue to edit and do things as we're all stuck at home. And other than that, our writer clients have actually been thriving in a way. Thankfully, WGA strike and none of that happened, so work has still been coming in for them. People are finding, a lot of our content creators are finding new ways and means to actually create, whether it's via podcast or, just posting more on social media and creating some sort of collaborative effort with other artists. Our firm represents a lot of musicians, so they've been coming together and doing a lot of projects, whether it's for a certain cause or just to sort of start to incubate a group of work that they can then, pay, sort of tweak and put out into the world at a later date. So we've been fortunate, and our clients have seemed to be very proactive. So it's been good to see it. I mean, our work has shifted a bit, as all of ours have, but things keep moving. And, as Kathy said, everyone's relying so much on art, and we all need it. And so I think it's been sort of the saving grace of all of this.
Okay, great. Paul?
I mean, from the casting point of view, it's been a little strange. We haven't obviously been able to have in-person casting sessions for, what are we, in the 9th week of this, since March 13th or so. So for a couple of weeks at the very, very beginning, it was really, really dead. And I was home, and I still am home. I'm home with my kids, and they're all school, and we all, before we were all killing each other. We did just start up on the second season of a series we did for Facebook Watch called The Birch, which is like a kind of Indian spirit, I guess. It's sort of a low budget sort of horror and horror series. And the first season, apparently, it's hard to tell with a lot of streaming things how well they do, but apparently it was enough for them to do another season. So the point, I mention this because it's the first thing that I'm really actively casting since this all went down. And so everything's been virtual. Everyone's been putting themselves on tape at home, or wherever they are. And that's something people do anyway when they're out working and they can't come into the office in New York or in LA. In a weird way, I'm not gonna say it's better for actors, but there is actually more. There's just a chance to see more people. I was just looking to see where we are in the tapes that have come in for one of the roles in this show. And there were about 250 tapes that came in over the past 2 weeks. And that would take me, I don't know how many weeks to see 250 people in person. So in a weird way, it's a little bit of an opening because so many people can put themselves on tape. One thing that my colleagues and I have been talking about in casting is, on the assumption that we're not going to be able to do in-person casting sessions for a while, how do we then do callbacks via Skype or Zoom with the director working with them? How do you do chemistry sessions where you get 2 actors together, if you even can? And also sort of on a weird, the level playing field of it all is that everyone has Final Cut or some version of Final Cut. So I'm getting a lot of self-tapes from 19-year-olds that look amazing. And they're like wardrobed and they're mic'd and they're really edited. So it's sort of interesting. And it's, you know, it's just different. I mean, in a weird way, the process is the same. People audition, we watch them, and then we see who we want to, you know, sort of have in callbacks. It's just a different, it's just in a different setting. It's a little weird, but I guess from the actor's point of view, I don't know, Kathy, if you agree, I mean, it's better than nothing. It's better than not having anything to audition for. So we'll see, having said all that, if the show, and we can talk about this, I don't know if this, Michael's on your sort of agenda, but I'm very curious to see what happens when this show and another couple of movies I'm working on, they say they want to go September, October. I'm really curious what that's going to look like, because everything can't be like your movie where there's a crew of 15 or 20 and everyone's a cast of 4.
Yeah, I'll
be very curious. And from the actor's point of view, I'll be curious to see, you know, not everyone's like Kathy, where I think some people will be nervous and they won't want to get on a plane or stay in a hotel, or if you can get insurance for that. I think it's all going to have to play out in some way where one production sort of passes the threshold and nobody gets sick, and then other people will want to do it or feel comfortable doing it.
We'll get into more of that in a minute, but
let's
just jump back over to Dewey and let him update us about his stuff.
Hey, I've started to write a lot more, which has been interesting. I finished the feature film version of King Esther called The Inevitable Sadness of All Things Good. And believe it or not, I have been learning a lot of new recipes, and I have been sleeping a lot, which for an indie creator, that is the one thing I think we had deprived ourselves of for year on year on year on year. And so once I slept and got over the guilt of sleep, now I sleep comfortably. So I'm pretty much writing and sleeping.
Just don't have a kid. That's my advice. Continue sleeping? Yeah, doesn't work. All right, cool. So obviously we'll dive into this since it's, you know, we've caught up a little bit. But so AMPTP Task Force released their white paper like a few days ago. I don't know if everybody here has read it or not, but it's actually, I don't think anybody was terribly surprised by a lot of it. I think it's all stuff we've probably all been thinking about. But it reflects apparently a combination of IATSE, SAG-AFTRA, DGA, Teamsters, thoughts on how to get back into production and how to protect people's health in doing so. So assuming that, assuming that a vaccine, who knows when the vaccine will or won't come. So for the indefinite future, I think we just want to talk about what, you know, Paul was already bringing up in some ways from his point of view. What are the biggest hurdles in terms of production? How are we going to get through this stuff and work through this stuff if we are going to? So I'm wondering if you guys have thoughts about what kinds of projects you think won't get made for a long time. So what kind of stuff won't get made and maybe what we'll see more and more of.
I'll jump in. As a first AD and having safety traditionally been falling onto our role in set, I did take a pretty in-depth look at the white paper and just sort of actually made notes when it first came out. I think it came out a few days ago on June 1st, about questions that I had in open endings that I think, you know, hopping on Paul Schnee's idea of like, one film will kind of set the precedent. And that could even be like for multiple tiers of budgets, because for a multi-million-dollar motion picture, that's going to be a largely different system than an indie movie that might on a good day have, 60 crew members or something, and would have to scale down even from there for an under $1 million potential budget. The biggest things I saw was how difficult it would be to run any production from these, guidelines. The first things I was seeing, I took it sort of as a process of from pre-production, from where I would typically start, to the wrap-up principal photography. And the biggest first things I saw were like production offices with shared workstations. Already, you know, we're seeing a traditional office environment being taken home. Well, that's kind of challenging for a film where so many ideas are being, you know, you're going to a conference room or you're spitballing or you're reading a script in person. I've tried to do it before when we have like crew members from LA or Atlanta coming to New York. We're trying to do like, you know, before Zoom, whatever kind of calls. And it was very challenging to bounce ideas off. And communicate effectively working in a remote environment. So already I saw that shared workspace being, you know, something difficult. Fortunately though, something a little less challenging I saw was going paperless, which I think the industry has been long overdue for. We've already seen things like Green Slate taking over, you know, and adapting or revolutionizing our industry to be less wasteful. I think that's only beneficial, sides and things like that, although I do see use for them, and I personally carry paper copies. I think we can make the adjustment more easy. They're easier than other things I see. But in terms of like, you know, in principal photography itself, you know, getting to set every day, I'm seeing like, you know, individual rides for people, like everybody, you know, or in the case of New York where you have to take public transportation, you know, it's going to be difficult to keep everybody, you know, contained or you know, guarantee nobody's been exposed. I see like productions that happen in the suburbs or rural communities much easier than shooting in main cities because you can't guarantee where people came from and what they were exposed to even leaving their apartment building, unless you're like taking them right from their building, putting them in a personal vehicle and taking them to set, which if you're doing that times 20, times 40, times 60, for an indie budget, that's killer. It's, you know, it'll kill a production. Catering is going to be an issue. Yeah. Sorry. Oh.
Isabella, I was gonna say, I wonder if there's a bit of a silver lining. You know, maybe this is me being hopeful, but you know, I've been on so many sets and dealt with so many cast and crew, and often what happens is, you know, the safety and comfort and health of the cast and crew gets forgotten about. That's like the last thing that anybody thinks about. And I wonder, you know, maybe this is me, you know, pie in the sky, silver lining, but like we're gonna think about that now. That's you know, near the top of everyone's list right now. And so, you know, maybe something that good can come out of this is, you know, all the things that you're listing, like, oh, you know what, we're going to start thinking about our people a little more like people. You know, productions have been, you know, few productions have gotten in big trouble, you know, because bad things have happened. But then, you know, I see it. Even my you know, even my productions where I think about it happens all the time. Just, oh, right, I put way too many extras in that room, or put way too many people in a 15-passenger van. It just always happens.
No, that's true.
Do we think that it's that in terms of the question of like what kinds of projects, is it really going to come down to money, do you think? Go ahead, Dewey.
Yes, that was one of the main things that I wanted to kind of speak to, was kind of a little bit more of your original question. Although Michael and Isabella make amazing points, I know honestly when I saw the white pages, I felt a sense of hopelessness, to be quite honest with you. The challenges for young Black filmmakers to get our work out there and into the universe is already difficult as it is, and it looks like these budgets are going to go up at least 25%, and it's going to be hard to get licensed and bonded for COVID-19 because they haven't even set the prices for what those are going to be yet. So while it did give me a chance to rest, for a lot of conversations among especially indie filmmakers and people of color, we see a lot of hopelessness because the only kind of productions that really can take those type of financial hits are the big players. So it just makes it a little bit more difficult for the smaller creators.
Especially now with, you know, the recent news of the tax incentive in New York, and how that's changed for, you know, so many budding filmmakers, so many filmmakers of color, you know, minority filmmakers or even international filmmakers rely on budgets of, you know, maybe 250,000 or 500. I think it's now, you know, UPA now and MPA, right, is the new SAG ones. I haven't even become familiar myself, but with that, like COVID plus the tax incentive changes are going to make it really hard for people who had just started getting a more accessible platform and been able to take advantage of like the advances in technology will have issues and might be taking a step back because of the world as it is now.
Well, Anita, can you speak at all to, I mean, you guys must be talking about the insurance issue. We're all talking about the insurance issue, but is there any sense that, I mean, even on the bigger budget films, even on the studio films, nobody knows what the heck's is going to go on, let alone the indies.
Right. We actually have a filmmaker who's fairly established. You know, he's had a few successful films already, working on a new project, and sort of there's a little bit of a war between, a bidding war between the studios, and two of the big studios will not guarantee insurance that protects against any COVID related issues. One will, and that alone is change, sort of determining which way we go, because it's just the great unknown at this point. No one really knows how it's going to be handled. And even as we were in productions, seeing the way that the different studios or streamers handled the force majeure event itself, and how they paid or didn't pay their artists and their cast and their crew, was very telling. I mean, obviously some places have a lot more money than others, and we all know who those people are, but that felt like some places purposely took advantage of the situation to be able to not pay, and others were very collaborative and really wanted to take care of their people. So it's very case by case, and I think it's hard to predict even, and I think for all of us, it makes our jobs harder because we don't know. I can't advise my clients as to what the best route is, and I think it's hard for producers and everyone on this Zoom to be able to actually know what the next situation will be.
Because it's not only, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not only a question of finishing, bonds, but it's, it's not only the question of the LLC potentially getting sued, but I imagine it opens up individual producers, directors, whoever, to lawsuits as well.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think, obviously, especially in this transitionary period where some films that may have a smaller crew and cast are willing to move forward, even if they get the financing and everyone feels comfortable, if something goes wrong, it's really, everyone can sue anyone. So it's really up for grabs. The LLC only, the LLC protects you, of course, but not to the extent that someone has, if it feels like a personal call that the director should have taken and they didn't, it's not going to fully protect you.
Yeah, even with, I've seen some agreements recently with a waiver. I absolve you of responsibility for any COVID-19 related issues. But like you said, it's only so much,
Right.
that maybe is something in place with the company, but not in place between individuals.
Yeah.
Certainly won't fly with union folks. I mean, there's no way the unions are going to allow their members to sign a waiver, right?
That it won't legally hold, because you have to you have to guarantee a safe environment.
Right.
So a waiver is actually null and void.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's something we've been struggling actually, because we are, for Feed the Freelancers, we're all film employees. So we're all people, producers, ADs, business owners who are coming from film set experience. And even we had the issue for our volunteers, because like Anita said, anybody can sue anybody. And so when we're doing things, even for a charitable effort, we're finding it difficult, if someone comes down with COVID-19, which one of our volunteers it has happened, it's operating on a goodwill that they won't blame us, which goodwill only goes so far, especially when you stop thinking about charity and you start thinking about an entertainment-based industry. So it's been very intimidating because, so maybe for a multi-million-dollar production, maybe a suit won't be as impactful, but for an indie production, which maybe has less than $1 million, it could completely stall and ruin a production, which, it's a complicated and controversial subject to bring up.
How is Netflix doing it? Netflix is shooting in Australia and New Zealand, right? That's what I've been told. And they also apparently want to shoot green screen, where they're going to put actors, like they can shoot actors with nobody there, and then they can put them together, by computer. So I don't know, Netflix seems to be, and then somebody else told me that Netflix has so much money that even if they can't get insurance, they'll insure themselves. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not, but
yeah, I have to say Netflix has been one of the better partners throughout all of this. They've been really good about taking care of their teams and really, you know, enforcing safety policies that are feasible. So in my experience and in the projects that I've seen, they've been very forward thinking. So you know, whether it's shooting in locations where the risk is much less, or, you know, looking to reschedule things based on where they think you could move an entire production to, they've been supportive of those ideas. But I can't say that all studios or all platforms are actually doing that.
Have they been, oh, sorry. I was just wondering do we know if they were working with like a COVID-19 compliance officer? Like, did they have a point person for those sets? Because I know that's what the US released, but I'm curious if they're doing that in other countries.
I'm not aware of it. I guess my question in that regard is, who is that person? Is it a doctor? Is it, you know, because it's so, and how much does that person actually know more than the rest of us? Because there's still so much that's unknown.
Well, that's what I was curious about, because it's like, okay, so should someone fall ill? Usually, you know, we've seen in cases of, you know, different kinds of dangers on set or tragedies on set, it's fallen to, of course, the first assistant director, who is a herald of safety, a key grip, maybe a director if they're also in a producing capacity, depending on how much people knew or chose to keep from the crew. But now it's like, you know, for something so unpredictable as this, like, is there a safety department that's going to have a medical expert on set? And like, are our set medics going to be on site for every single day? Those are some questions that I've been sort of musing over myself, because when we talk about liability, of course, the first people we think about are like my job description. And where, well, I know internationally it changes, but in the United States, that's the case.
Yeah, ounce of prevention, maybe in budget. I'm reminded though, I think Dewey, something you said, I'm reminded that every film that I have ever done we've always had dates on the calendar for production that have pushed, every time, and it had nothing to do with COVID. It had everything to do with these projects. You know, feature films are so hard to get made. TV series are so hard to get made, you know, independently. So independent projects, it's kind of the name of the game is they take a long time, and, you know, so maybe it's another sort of hopeful aspect of this. But, you know, COVID's going to go away sometime, you know, and if it doesn't, then God help us all. But it's, you know, like when it goes away, and, you know, in a year, then, you know, we're all still making our films, and, you know, Dewey, like you said, you're writing, you know, and this is that time you're getting that stuff done. You know, I think it's about staying productive and staying sort of keeping the long view in mind, because it will be, you know, these timelines are long on projects.
They sure are. Assuming, let's move on from the sort of doom and gloom of the insurance question, which is yet to be answered, and I have a feeling may require a working federal government, which hopefully we will have come, you know, January. So, because it may come down to the federal government saying we will insure these industries, you know, for the time of this.
That's such a good idea. What you just said is so great. Like, why can't the federal government step in? Why?
Interesting.
I can answer that.
Oh.
Entertainment. His name is Mitch McConnell. Entertainment's one of the biggest exports that this country has. There's a bailout for the entertainment industry, maybe in the form of insurance. But anyway, moving on from that, let's assume that issue gets figured out in some way, whether it's piecemeal or, you know, if you get to jump on board Amazon and they have enough money to pay for it or whatever. But we still have the issue of COVID around and mitigation for COVID around. You know, they're talking about smaller crew sizes. So I'm curious what we all think in terms of, and I hate to use this word, but which positions are more expendable than others?
I mean,
I don't think it's necessarily about expendability. I'm sorry to talk over you guys. I'm sorry. I don't think it's necessarily about who's expendable, but I think that what can happen is people can become stronger and represent themselves in a stronger manner. I mean, I know we've all worked on crews and we knew we had just like a few too many people. So I think you can get stronger people who could do a little bit more in a more efficient way. So I think the people like that are indie filmmakers have a little bit of a competitive advantage there because we know how to play small ball. And since we know how to play small ball, we can take a crew of 30 and make a production that runs 2 hours, where I would imagine some of the bigger filmmakers that are used to doing $200 budgets, they can't think in those terms. So I think we have an advantage there to use our intellect in the natural way that we move in order to do things. And I don't think it's necessarily expendable. I just think now you'll see people taking on maybe 2 or 3 or additional roles that they may have not had before, like the first AD, may become a script supervisor as well, which I know that sounds crazy right there, but it may be different things like that where you just take dual roles, and hopefully people will become from a more talented talent pool.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think what Dewey said, I mean, there are features that I've worked on that are, close to $1 million, but due to the nature of, like, for example, shooting on Staten Island Ferry, we could bring, 15 people, and that's, 1 actor, and that's just what we did to stay within the budget. And, obviously with more people on the ground, but I think it'll be like, it's the difference of like a shoot crew versus a remote crew. Like, who can be in like a remote production office environment and be working, not be part of the crew count, or even at like base camps? Are there, is there a camera team that's just at base camp who are charging the batteries or doing things, handing them off, sanitizing them, handing them off to the shoot crew, which is maybe 20 people, and staying that way. So yes, you can have like a slightly larger crew, but all of those people are working like, remotely, instead of right on set. And like, how we're seeing it now, especially in New York, where you have, 30 people crammed into an apartment. We'll take 15 of those and put them somewhere else. Yes, it'll be more expensive and more challenging, but I think, Michael touched upon it earlier, that it can be a silver lining of like, nobody actually really likes being in that environment in August in the summer, shooting with a bazillion people in an apartment without air conditioning. So let's change that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can there's lighting that can be done before anybody shows up. The lighting crew comes in and then goes away, and then, just keep 1 or 2 people on set. Hair and makeup, Kathy, like you said, there's, it doesn't have to just be one person. It could be, somewhere else, in that small unit, and then, yeah.
I think though that there should be some talk about this in terms of, just going forward for people who are making their first or second or third indie feature. Without COVID, I've gone to set and I've been at set at 10 a.m. and the first shot didn't come off until 4 p.m. Okay, so that's disgraceful, right? And so I think it's extremely important that during this time that maybe this could be a catalyst for everybody talking about what's really necessary given a budget, given the structure of the film, given the structure of the narrative. Who do you need? How many people do you need? And so that you don't become top heavy with people on computers and not enough grips and gaffers. And then, you know what I mean? Like there's a beautiful balance in indie film, and learning that is important. And I think people like James Seamus and these people, we need to mine these people and say, talk about balance, talk about who should be here, how many should be here, on what budget, on what narrative structure. Let's use this time as a tutorial so that we can all go back more efficiently and better.
Also, I want to just hop on and also be, how long do we need to be there? Do we all have to be on set from 12 to 14, or sometimes our PA's working 16 hours a day, which we already knew was unsafe. It's the hardest conditions and the most difficult situations for crews around the world. I mean, maybe aside from India or China, the US is notorious for that kind of lack of regard for their crew and cast. So when we talk about how many people need to be on set, you know, at one time, well, it's also maybe in terms of shifts, where if we're having a grip and electric pre-light, they come in and pre-light, you know, at the top of the day or something, they check out, they've done their work. Maybe there's a couple maintenance guys who pick up after the fact, after a round of sanitization. You're already at a point where there's, first of all, you can keep, even if your crews on one, you know, at one time are smaller, you're still employing enough people to keep the industry afloat. While at the same time, those people can have a work-life balance that we're talking about, where they can go to work, go home, get some rest, and God forbid we all have a social life, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But let's take this in the direction of talking about creatively. How do you know, with all of the stuff that has to be juggled and everything from what we're discussing to some of the stuff we haven't discussed in terms of, is it possible to actually clean everything on a set every 5 seconds and keep things moving? If in regard to proximity, in regard to, you know, they're suggesting fewer takes per scene. How do we think this is going to change things creatively? Like, can actors have that kind of intimacy when they're shooting things separately all the time, where there's, you know, can the director and the actors have that level of intimacy with each other? The DP have that level of intimacy with the actors? I mean, it's a creative process. It's not just like it's not mathematical. It's not like, well, if we just shoot this guy here and shoot this person here, then put them together, then that's a movie. It's not so simple, right? I mean, Paul, do you have any sense of how actors are thinking about this? And of course, Kathy?
I mean, I haven't heard anything directly from actors yet in terms of, I just don't know if anybody's there yet in terms of the headspace of like what, you know, everyone's still auditioning and self-taping, and the fact that there aren't a lot of projects happening right now, you know, we're luckily getting in lots of tapes and there's lots of interest. I do wonder what will happen when, you know, we start hiring people, and then what happens when you get on set and you like you just said, Michael, you know, someone's for safety reasons says, you know, we're only going to do 3 takes, or we're going to get, you know, in the best of circumstances, some, you know, rehearsal on set. I mean, without not camera rehearsal. Sorry, that's my dog. But you know, I don't know the answer. I've seen people, and I've worked on some scripts with people where they're reconfiguring. I don't know if Dewey, this is your experience, but they're reconfiguring, you know, a crowded restaurant scene, for example, and thinking creatively that way, maybe more practically than they had to in the past. And I don't have a good answer for how the actors will approach it. I think you'll just have to wait and see.
Can I jump in?
Well,
Oh, go ahead, Dewey.
Yeah, I'd like to know what he says as a director.
So what I was really thinking was I don't think we can underscore ourselves as creators or the power of ingenuity. The other day when I had to sit down and really, I decided to take one of my scripts and I decided to rework it, each scene with storyboards that allowed actors to be 6 feet apart.
COVID-friendly storyboards.
Right. And also one of the marks that has come against indie filmmakers is, well, there are no extras. Well, we never had extras. So we're not tripping about there's only 2 people for the scene. We know how to do that and make sense of it in a very significant way. So, and I can also say this, like, the power of the human spirit is there. You see it right now in these riots and these protests. It's there. I remember when we first started with COVID, I would go to the store with a mask on and I looked like the weirdest person, right? I looked the scariest person ever. Or in years past, whenever there would be a SARS outbreak and our Asian brothers and sisters would have on a mask, we would all look at them like, what's the problem? Now, if you go out and a person doesn't have a mask on, that's how you look at that person. Like, are you not paying attention to what's going on? So I think it'll just take a couple of tries for people to start recognizing the new way that we do things. And over time, I think audiences will start to train their eyes differently as well. And I think VFX artists are about to get hired like there's no tomorrow. So there's power in it. I think we can still maintain a level of excellence. I just think when we're thinking about creating content, we have to think about the indie filmmakers as well, because we have a special place in this industry. And I fear that it could get drowned out by the unfortunate circumstance that we find ourselves in.
Yeah. If you don't mind me hopping in, just as the bridge from, creative to logistical, as a first AD, eliminating takes, I don't think is ever productive or, worth it, just because once you get to that point and you've spent the time doing it, you might as well do it right, and takes never really save that much time, because realistically it's 1 minute out of, several hours of prep. I think more productive in terms of thinking creatively is, I know a lot of directors and DPs rely on getting to set and seeing something and making the decisions in the world that they're arriving in, which can sometimes create some magic because it's the unexpected and it's like this true, honest, type of filmmaking where you're really discovering things. But I think in times of COVID, we have to think more strategically about how we're planning the day, and even on an indie level, where people are, sort of discovering things as they go. I think, a really solid shot list, what Du's talking about with, storyboarding really specifically what kind of shots you want to achieve and how you're going to get to that specific place. So you go in with a game plan and you don't have to put your actors or your creatives through this, like, let's switch it up, because that wastes time. And that will allow you to get the amount of takes you want and the amount of, creative perfection you need when you go in with that level of prep. So I think
what you're suggesting is a form of filmmaking that's going to be very different from certain ways that some directors want to work. I mean, Mike certainly worked with a number of directors that I assume were much looser in the way that they plowed through. I mean, was the men storyboarded? I mean,
yeah, well, The Man is a good example of a movie where we planned very closely. A lot of what you're saying is sort of, sometimes to maximize a indie film budget, you have to do those things anyway. But I think, and Dewey, you said it, like the independent film system, I think there's going to be a lot of things from that world of filmmaking that are going to apply then now to the bigger productions and the studios, because for that same reason, like it's more efficiency. You just have to do it, and so you need to make the edit. Don't film as much and just make the edits in the script phase instead of the edit phase. So yeah, but The Man was filmed in a very small New York City apartment. So I think maybe that's not the COVID plan.
All right. Are there any, I mean, those of you who deal with unions, is there anything that the unions you think should be doing right now in terms of either temporarily suspending rules, or is there anything you think that they should be coming down specifically on in respect to getting started again, or thoughts about how things work?
I personally, I would want to hear from the members. I would want to hear from what people are saying. Kathy, you said it, like, we want to get back to work. And so we can only assume as producers, as the people doing the hiring, I think we can only assume so much, or sort of take case examples from the individuals that we talk to. But it would be really helpful for us to have statements from the union saying a majority of our members are willing to make these type of risk sacrifices in order to get back to work, or a majority of our members want to prioritize X, Y, and Z related to COVID, because I think that's one thing that the unions have is the voice of everybody. So I think that would be a very helpful thing at the moment.
I just don't want it to be crazy though, because like when you say every actor has to have their own hair and makeup person, I think that's crazy budget stuff. I mean, I'm not I don't do budgeting, but I don't understand it. If somebody, does good sanitizing of their brushes and themselves and wears a mask and everything, why can't they do makeup for 2 or 3 people? Like, I don't think I really don't think most actors are crazy about that sort of stuff. And I think actors are really good at self-care, really good at it. And, you know, like Melissa Leo on the movie she won the Oscar for, it was in the
Frozen
cold.
River.
Yeah, she did her own hair and
The
makeup.
fighter.
Oh, okay, so okay, she does her own hair and makeup. She does her own hair and makeup all the time. I know a lot of actors, and actors are much like, my only fear about going to SAG and to call them to say what this is what we have to have is that, like Dewey says, you can't blow the budget, right? And I think what the one thing that indie film does have is we have narrative, right? We have narrative content, and we're not. I mean, I'm not trying to say that others are producing problem, but the indie film can rely on the script, and a script, the story, you can watch 2 or 3 actors, and it can be your whole movie. You don't need a cast of thousands. That's the one thing we have, and we can make a movie with 15 people. I mean, I have done it, and you know, it's beautiful. So I think actually Dewey's right. I think we have the advantage, and I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to the union. I'm sort of like, I have to pay attention to your rules. I don't know. I don't know.
It's kind of a complicated balance, because if there are rules set by the unions that are too complex or just too impossible, like you know, for an indie film to accomplish, they will just completely. I already have a production who's decided not to be SAG and to use all non-union actors because it's too difficult, and they only have 6 actors, everybody quarantines, and no background is even in the script, you know, at this point. So they're just completely going around it. So I think what we'll see with too many requirements or not enough, you know, voices from both sides, that we'll just see a lot more non-union in every, whether it's IATSE, DGA, SAG. But on the other hand, it's like some of these rules are necessary because we don't have all of the information about COVID to completely ignore all of the rules that are being set in place by the unions. We're also not taking enough into consideration the overall health and safety. And when we're thinking about art, we have to, you know, we have to balance, like, you know, what's more important in this scenario, you know, the health and safety of the creators or the creative content. So it's a hard balance, but I definitely agree with you guys pretty much overwhelmingly that we do have that indie spirit will definitely take us to places that, you know, people who are used to every sort of bell and whistle might not be able to adjust to.
Yeah,
what I'm hopeful about, what I'm hopeful about is that, I mean, from where I sit, you know, I come in often very, very early on, and then I'm often the first person to leave once shooting starts because my job is over. But in a lot of sort of what we call consultation periods with, you know, producers and sometimes studios where we're making lists of names that everyone's grandmother on this panel could generate by looking at IMDb, and it's not very creative, and they say, oh, well, if we don't get, pick a name, you know, Keira Knightley and whomever else, we're not going to make your movie. And then you offer to Keira Knightley, and she says, I'm not getting on a plane and staying in a hotel with COVID out there. And then we say, well, we can get this other person. And the investors say, well, who's that? What I'm hoping is that the who's that, those of us at a lesser stature will actually have more opportunities, because there'll be more of a flexibility, and investors will then have to say, you know, you believe in the script and the creative vision or only the marketplace, you know, viability. So it'll be very interesting to see where, you know, when we've all done movies, I would expect with, you know, hedge fund dudes who are putting up a couple $1 million for the hell of it, but only if they can, you know, go to Sundance. Well, who knows if Sundance is going to happen ever again, you know, being the petri dish that it is. So it's in a silver lining, which is not my normal default at all. I think it might open things up for there to be less pressure on the sort of traditional, you know, pre-sales values or whatever things are from my point of view coming with actors, where maybe people will start to take more chances if they can see that something can be done with lesser known names, but equally brilliant at a lesser at a lesser budget. That's my optimistic thought for the decade, I guess.
And I think one thing to add to that, based on what Dewey had said, sort of touched on before, is, retraining, whether it's our eyes or the audience's eyes, to be okay with what an indie film looks like. I mean, my father, who's the first to watch any action movie or like Marvel type movie, is now, because of COVID, consuming so much indie content and loving it. So now when we're actually back in our normal world, he'll seek it out, and I think our audience has already changed in that way because they've sort of been forced to in some regards. And so now they get to see the beauty of indie films that we've all known for all these years.
I suspect there will be a big shift in terms of, Michael, Sládek, you and I have been talking about we're producing a movie together. We've been talking about, Eliza Hittman's last movie or Blow the Man Down or some of these very small movies that in a weird way, for all of us in the field, they were kind of on our radar because of festivals, but hey, I'll get to see it when it goes to the quad and now you just have to turn it on your computer or your TV. So in a strange way, I wonder if the streaming world distribution that way might, like you said, Anita, I feel like, my friend who is an English professor in Columbus, Ohio, might see a movie that, he wouldn't have driven to Cleveland to see a year ago or whatever. So I don't know, there's an upside.
Can we talk about for a minute the festivals that are not going to happen and how these indie films find platforming if they're not going to get all those little laurels with all those little awards? Because, I mean, I agree. I love what you're saying. I love where you're all going. Can we for a moment visit the way a film makes noise?
Sure. I think it's important to talk about. I mean, a lot of these festivals are going to go away altogether, the smaller ones, because the economic situation won't support them. And those that are going to survive will be the big guys, and they may all be online. And not only how do these films find an audience, but how do we as filmmakers meet each other? Because that's usually where we meet each other. If we're not working together, we're usually meeting each other over cocktails at Sundance or Tribeca or wherever it may be. And especially so, young/new filmmakers who don't know a lot of people, that's the spot, right? That's the place. So it's a great question. And I don't know if there's an answer. I think they're trying to figure it out, right?
One thing that I think is really interesting is I think we're going back to the day right when the technology boom hit and the small guy could make a film, right? And so with that thought process in mind, everything that gets created in the next couple of years is going to have a very high level of value. I think with reference to the laurels, I think we can all agree that there's become an oversaturation of film festivals where you have now 400 film festivals. My shoe film festival was only about shoes. We've seen different kind of festivals like that. And I think what it kind of does is kind of resets all of us and everybody gets to hold their value. So now the young Black film makers that make a film, it has value now that it wouldn't have had the same time because they were able to make something in this age. And I think that's really powerful. And if I could take 1 second to go back, I thought that Anita and Isabella made some really great points. What this also allows us to do as far as health is concerned is to go into collaboration with our fellow creators. Because before the rules would just get set and we would have to do whatever the rules dictated. But now, if you're acting in my project, Katherine, I could talk to you and we can actually have a conversation about your health as well, which is a conversation that we never got to have. And I think this opportunity for me, for COVID, has connected me to a lot of family members that I hadn't talked to in years, to be quite honest with you. And I don't think we would have gotten to meet today if it hasn't been for COVID. So I think while a lot of things will be lost, I think there's still a lot to be gained on the other side.
Yeah, that's very true. I didn't even think of that. I mean, communication has always been something where if you have enough of it, you're setting up your film to be very successful. But at the same time, if you don't have enough and you're flying by the seat of your pants, kind of, a lot of things get lost in translation. And it's also where a lot of abuse happens, whether it's, the disregard for safety in terms of COVID, or it's, we're rushing into a scene, a lovemaking scene, and, our actors haven't been communicated with effectively enough, which now, of course, we're seeing, new vanguards coming forward to, with Me Too movement and, intimacy coordinators. So I think, it takes a big movement or a big event to spur necessary change. So COVID-19 can be that change in terms of health and safety. But, thinking about the festivals too, I like what you said, Dewey, about resetting, the legitimacy of grassroots filmmakers, because we have been experiencing, like, even with festivals now, there's a sort of political nature, and there's an entire, tactic to approaching a festival. There's certain connections you have to have or processes you have to follow that might, either bring up a film that just has a lot of connections and maybe not so much creative behind it, and might overshadow a film that's really, really worth seeing, but just doesn't have the names to survive. So I do like that sliver of hope that, all these voices can have a better and a more equal platform to communicate.
Yeah, and that Paul said about casting is that we can watch more actors, who we don't know. It could be a great time for breakout actors. And I don't know, I mean, if that's something, Paul, you want to talk about, but I feel like in the last few months, I've watched some of the classic films that we all, and you see in these casts, you're like, okay, none of those people were known when they made the movie. And I know 8 of those people right now. These are 8 breakout performances, and 8 times have people been put from one film, or 6 times from one film into the public eye in such a fantastic way. And so I hope that Paul is right, that we're going to get a new way for everybody to look at actors, and that was something that Orange Is the New Black did, and I hope that that's something that this time, I hope you're right, Paul.
I hope so. I'm never right, but I hope that
Well,
turns out to be right.
I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think there is going to be we're all going to be doing some serious soul searching, right? I mean, at this point, I think the whole world is sitting down and looking at itself and saying, what's important? So, for better or worse, I think a lot of people are probably going to decide, well, I remember really wanting to be a filmmaker, a director, or a producer, or this or that or the other. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I need to go do something else with my life, and I don't think that that's a bad thing necessarily, because I think the last 10 years we've seen just a proliferate. I mean, every kid in America is a filmmaker all of a sudden, and we all can't be filmmakers because nobody has time to watch all of these things coming out. So, I mean, I don't remember who said it, but somebody, Dewey used to mention the Shoes Film Festival or whatever. It was all going to break at some point, right? So maybe in some ways it's a good paring down.
Yeah, the festivals as a marketplace have even become less, less of what it once was, 10 years ago. Nowadays at the big festivals, at least, you'll see most of the films there already have a distributor. It's not, 10 years ago, that was definitely not the case. And so I think I've definitely tracked that. It's just as the years have gone on, I don't know. It's not that it's, lost relevancy, but it's just lost that system to it.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could just say one thing that I think could be interesting. I met a woman who, she does branding for like she puts brands into films, and, that gets financing that way, Coca-Cola or Apple or whatever, Hilton. And I think one of the interesting things to think about now for filmmakers writing scripts going forward is, like, set your film where the market has dropped out. So that, like, set your film at a Marriott in Orlando, right? That Marriott in Orlando actually needs people in their rooms, and it's much more likely that you could get that Marriott in Orlando than you ever could before. So I just want to say to the indie film community, to the writers that are out there, that this might be a chance for you to obtain an airport. Like Newark Airport, you could get Newark Airport right now. You could shoot at Newark Airport. I bet you could get it. So, like, maybe, I bet you could. I bet you could say, I bet you could call up somebody in the mayor's office in Jersey and say, hey, we want Newark Airport. We're an indie film. And I think you'd have a chance at getting locations that you could never get before. And also by helping to brand that location, that location would actually want you to be there. And so I'm just saying, I think it's a possibility. I'm not, you know.
That Orlando Marriott's very tempting, I'll tell you.
One thing that I do think it does do, I apologize, Isabel, but it also does take the narratives back to the architects. And those, now the values would come in those COVID-friendly scripts that are still nuanced and excellent in a way that it's really become about who's the actor. You know, this goes back to the origination of the crafting of the narratives and the story. So it's an opportunity, I think, in a lot of ways. And I'm not always this positive. Trust me, I had a really tough day 2 days ago, but I do think there's a lot of possibilities. And if you focus on that, it'll make the journey for all of us just a little bit more bearable.
I love that. Well, and on that note, we should probably wrap this up. We've been going for quite a while, but I do want to, I've been wanting to leave this on a high note, which I think Dewey is helping us do already. But there's a quote that I like to mention to people from Shep Gordon, who was the subject of the documentary Supermensch, where he says that, you know, with his clients, whenever they inevitably go through a down side of their career and they're feeling like they're stuck, that he just tells them that the trick is just to stay in the water. Even if you're just treading that water and just going nowhere for a while, just stay in that water and tread and just keep in there and things will come back up. So
You're here.
thanks everybody for taking your time. I really
Thanks, Michael.
appreciate it. We appreciate it. And good luck to everybody. Keep faith, keep working, stay safe, stay healthy.
Tread the water,
Right.
tread the water.
Yes.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Care.
Take care.